widely loved. So Tig and I are going to have a great conversation for the next 15 minutes. And to start, I gave a very brief overview of those 4 months. If you don't mind, I'd love to hear a bit more in detail sort of what unfolded and the experiences you went through to make sure the crowd knows.
Well, I've been doing stand-up for, I guess it's 16, 17 years now. And before all this happened, my career and my life was going perfectly fine. I didn't have a complaint in the world, and was touring around the world and shot a movie and a TV pilot. I was doing a play, and then I got pneumonia. And I'm not really a sickly person, and it just kind of threw me off a bit. I didn't know I had pneumonia. It developed and got worse. I went to the doctor and got antibiotics, and I contracted C. diff after my 2 weeks of pneumonia. And C. diff is a bacterial infection where the bacteria C. diff takes over your digestive tract, and it can be caused from taking antibiotics. And what happens is it clears out all the bacteria. Yeah, and so C. diff is alone to thrive, and I couldn't ingest food or water, and I was hospitalized. Finally got out, and I lost 20 pounds because even though I tested negative for C. diff, it had still done so much damage, and I didn't have bacteria built up to be able to digest food. So lost 20 pounds, and a few days after I got out of the hospital, my mother, she tripped. She clipped an end table and hit her head, and she was okay initially. And my stepfather checked her head, and she was talking and fine. And then that night he went to bed, and the next day got up, and she was still sitting there on the couch and was not ever conscious again. And so the next day I went out there and we took her off life support. And then my girlfriend and I split up several weeks after that. And then I was diagnosed with cancer a few weeks after that.
An unusual series of events. And most people, most of the time, wouldn't think the natural next step would be to have a stand-up routine about this. But this is what you did. And so maybe walk us through your thinking about this. You had a routine that was already, you were scheduled to sort of do an act, presumably not an act about just having been diagnosed with cancer. So talk us through the decision-making and sort of your thinking before you went and did that routine.
Well, I had done an episode of This American Life, and I had been asked to come back to do another segment on the radio show, and I just didn't feel like doing comedy, and I suggested that, because at this point I hadn't been diagnosed with cancer yet, and I told Ira Glass, the host, I said, can I just talk about everything I've been through? And he read through the pages that I had written. He was like, oh, this is so depressing. It's like...
Very sympathetic response.
Yeah. It's like, yeah, I know. I don't know what to do, though. This is my life. I don't feel like making jokes right now. And he said, your power is on stage. So I don't want you to just come into the studio and tell this story. When and if you find any humor in what you've gone through, I suggest you try and go on stage with it. And so I left his office just like,
People don't tell Ira that much, but...
So, I didn't think I was going to be able to do that. I didn't have an interest in that. And then I got diagnosed with cancer, and I was like, okay, now everything's hilarious. was just ridiculous at that point. So I already had a show booked in Los Angeles at this theater, Largo, where I always perform. And when I was diagnosed, I called to cancel the show. I was just going through too much. And the owner said, why don't we move the show to the following week in the event you feel like performing next week? And I was like, yeah, whatever. Whatever you want to do. And so I also had put off, even though I had been told I had cancer, I didn't find out my stage or anything that was going on.
So even worse news afterward.
What's that?
It was even worse news after you found out how bad it was.
Well, yeah, I didn't have any information, and I hadn't met with my oncologist yet, and I put off about 10 days, and my friends were like, what are you doing? Go go to the doctor immediately. And I was like, I'm so emotionally backed up from everything else that I was not in the mood to hear anything. And so I finally went to the doctor, and they said that it was bilateral, that it was stage 2, and that my cancer was actually invasive. And so because the cancer was not contained, they wouldn't be able to tell if it had spread or where it had spread until surgery. And I was just like, you've got to be kidding me. And so I left the doctor's office, and I got a text from the owner of Largo saying, are we doing the show? Which was the following night. I was literally weeping on the sidewalks of LA and just wrote, yes. In my head, I love doing stand-up, and I just thought, the way my life had gone at this point with the 4 months, I had no reason to think I was going to be anything but dead, So I love stand-up, and I wanted to do it one more time. And I also thought it might be cool if I record it, and maybe I could get on This American Life again. And I did.
And so you perform, and it's phenomenal. And Louis C.K. loves it, as do many other people as well. It goes viral. And were you surprised by the initial reaction to it?
Yeah, well, first of all, I'm not on Twitter, or I'm not on any of the, I'm like a great-great-grandmother.
Totally cool.
What's that?
It's a fad.
It's a fad, yeah. But yeah, I was shocked, and I had gone to bed that night. I had stayed up kind of late because even though I was just in this club telling the audience about what I had gone through and trying to make light of it, I did feel like, oh, this is going pretty well. And then I went out with my friends to a diner afterwards to talk, and we hung out, and then I emailed Ira at like 5 in the morning before I went to bed and said, hey, I think I got something that you could maybe use. And I went to bed, and I didn't wake up until about noon. And when I woke up, my phone was jammed with messages. I had gotten hundreds of emails and text messages. Book deal offers were coming in. And I was like, what happened while I was sleeping? I was so confused. It was really like this had happened to somebody's great-great-grandmother.
And so in some ways, this remarkable thing happens out of this tragedy, but the tragedy still exists. You still have cancer at the point, and so you're getting overwhelmed with interest, and you have to undergo surgery. And so how was that psychologically to simultaneously have all this attention? You had a substantial amount before, but even more showered on you, and then also having to undergo this surgery?
I just, at that point, I kind of removed myself a little bit, and there were core people in my life that I surrounded myself with, and I did speak to some press here and there about it, but it was, such an unusual way to go through what I was going through, because I had such tremendous support from the world. You don't get that. And I was typically a pretty private person before that happened. And that blew the doors off of that. But it was actually really nice. And it shifted me a bit, because it made me more open. Like, it made me want to be more open to people, and I felt very lucky that I had that experience.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, for many people, sort of the experience of being diagnosed with cancer, certainly undergoing surgery, a really transformational experience. Yours was in such a public way, and the reaction. How do you feel, if any, that you've changed because of the experience?
Well, I was already a positive, happy person before that happened, and so I sometimes think it was kind of a wasted lesson. Like,
should have been somebody else.
It really should have been somebody else. I don't have any person in my life that would be like, God, good thing this wake-up call finally came. But I think mainly just an openness. That's the main change that has happened for me. It's opened me to my family and friends and strangers in a way that it just was not there before,
And how do strangers now interact with you? What is the most common experience that you have when people come up to you?
Well, one of the best was because after people knowing about my issue with C. diff, and my diet was really restricted, and I'm eating pretty normally now, but I was walking across the street in New York one day, and this woman came up, and she was like, as I was crossing the street, she said, "Oh, I know you can only eat certain things, and just if you're hungry, this restaurant over here I think would be really good for your diet." And I was like, I was on a crosswalk going, "Thank you." Who was that? And but that kind of thing, I was like, God, that's awesome. People are so great.
And after this whole experience, stepping back, looking at the kind of the way it's not just impacted you, but kind of your perspective on the world, what advice would you have to other people who go through traumatic experiences, given how well you've really handled this difficult time?
I mean, for me, it was such basic things that I had to do to keep going, and that's what it was about, was to keep going. And very basic, lying in bed and just, okay, Tig, keep breathing. Just breathe in and out. Okay, Tig, get out of bed. All right, Tig, take a step, take another step, make a doctor's appointment. Just walking myself through life in such basic ways. And it really does just amount to needing to keep moving, because when you stop it's so many cliches, but they work. It's, use it or lose it, and it's keep moving, and that's basically that's how I feel with everything across the board, is just a little further, a little more, just keep trying, keep moving.
Just a healthy, pragmatic perspective. And lastly, just so we know, you are now cancer-free to your knowledge.
To my knowledge, I am fully in remission. So.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tig Notaro. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Yeah.